more kinds of restaurants operating today than there were 10 years ago. There are more people in the business that have gotten their place in that structure of the business that they deserve. Cooks becoming chefs, chefs becoming owners. But it's still, like I said, it's still that core of doing what you're supposed to do, and that's provide a great experience, whether it's dining, breakfast, lunch, whatever. Once you accomplish that, then the rest kind of falls in place.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, host of Restaurant Legends podcast, Tobie Nidetz. Tobie, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Yeah, I am. Once you learn how to talk.
Yeah, I know. No matter, like, I knock it out of the park during the pre-interview chat, and then once we hit record, like, I just forget how to talk. I do it all the time. I don't know what my problem is. But I am super psyched to have you here, man. You are so respected in the industry. You've been in the industry for as long as probably you've been working.
Well, actually, I started when I was like 10 in my dad's restaurant.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the menu for it up there.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll grab a photo of that before we leave.
Okay.
So you spent your entire life and career in this industry.
Yeah.
You've worked for amazing people. I know that Let Us Entertain You was a big part of your career at one point.
Early on, yeah.
Yeah, and who knows who else you've worked with. We're going to unpackage all that in today's conversation.
Okay, all right.
And we're going to talk about some things that are near and dear to your heart. Like the issue of tipping and who knows what else. But before we get into the conversation, share your story and share your perspectives. Let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Well, I tell people that they should get out of the restaurant business if they don't know how to do it, or some clients come to me and with brand new concepts and never been in the business before. I'll tell them, if you're ready to lose $500,000, let's go. Let's open a restaurant. But, so far it hasn't scared anybody. And, they'll open these restaurants. I had one client who opened a deli. He was ready to lose the money. He was okay with it, and then closed the deli 3 years after opening, only because he didn't think he was making any money, because he wouldn't do the price increases like I told him he had to do. He wanted to keep it reasonable. But that was 19. His corned beef sandwich, a very thick corned beef sandwich, he was only charging $14. And today that same thick corned beef sandwich is like $25.
Yeah, and I think that's where, we know that two things that you already pointed out. Restaurants fail because they're undercapitalized, and they also fail because they're afraid to charge what they're worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what's unreasonable is how the industry has gotten so, it's fiscal responsibility isn't a bad thing.
It's the only way to exist.
And we need it. I think people think about, we want to be generous. I think it's in our nature to be generous and to give. But at the end of the day, you're never going to do the amount of volume you need to do. Unless you have 500 seats and you got to line out the door. You got to charge what the value is to get your ROI. You got to reverse engineer it. Awesome way to get this thing started. So, and I joke all the time. My first goal of the Restaurant Unstoppable, the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. There should be like a subtitle mission statement and to talk you out of starting. But for those who want it, go for it. I'm not trying to discourage people, but at the same time, I think it's important and I'm sure you feel the same way, that we have to be transparent.
Well, sure. One of the first guys I ever worked for was Rich Melman, who turned Let Us Entertain You into this mammoth thing. But he opened R.J. Grunt's really on a shoestring. He had one partner, and I think he told me that he had R.J. Grunt's paid off in about a year.
Wow.
And that's very unusual for the early 70s, but even more unusual today. But, he learned that lesson that, if you put the right amount of money into it, and charge the right amount of money, you'll survive and you'll even thrive. Right. And later on, he kind of learned how to work the whole developer thing where they build restaurants for him.
Right. So. Yeah. Was that vertical integration, or did you just contract that out?
What, the
developers?
Oh, the developers? They come to you. It's they see its success at one location. They've got another location that they want to do, and
they want somebody who's going to pay the rent.
Yeah, they want somebody to pay the rent.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love that and I hate that at the same time, because you see a lot of these strip malls that explode across the country. These developers that just have, I don't know how many projects going at once, and they're all cookie cutter. They're all the same buildings, just in different parts of the country, who have these established relationships with franchises, and then they just go open franchises and strip malls all over the place. And it's a successful business model.
Yeah, it is.
But at the same time, I wonder, like, is there a better way for like the communities, and is there a way to keep that money local? I mean, I get that franchises aren't evil. I've kind of evolved a little bit over the time.
I think they're evil.
I mean, they do provide opportunity. It's weird. There's a balance, but I think there's a size that's right.
Yeah.
Like a regional franchise with 20 locations, is that evil?
No, yes and no. Yes, in the fact that it's a static menu that never changes. And yes, that menu is developed off of products that are not local.
Right.
So that makes it a little evil.
But you can still use the franchise model. Okay, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Imagine there's a chicken farm in this area, right? And there's a restaurateur and a farmer that pair up. And the restaurateur says, I'm going to buy my chickens all from you, from down the street. And with your humane practices and all the things you do, I'm going to take the chickens. I'm going to make a chicken salad restaurant. I'm going to make a chicken wing restaurant. I'm going to do a
fried
chicken tender.
Is best right now.
Yeah, or like a fried chicken restaurant, right? So you create micro regional franchises, and you use all the byproduct. You even make soup.
Yeah.
With the broth. Right.
Sure.
So I think you can use the model of franchising for systems, processes, and scalability and branding. But I think if you implement those with conscious capitalism, So
that helps absolutely. Yeah. But there's something that always gets in the way with that local business thing going on. A lot of guys have that dream to do it, but then when pricing gets out of control, they go back to a broadline distributor and start buying iced chicken. But the franchise model is good because it allows other people to get into the business who have no training whatsoever, have never owned a restaurant before. They've developed a pretty good bank account, so they've got the money to do it. And if the franchise is good, they give them excellent training and take them to the point where they're operating at the same level as everybody else. If they don't, they fail. And there are some franchises out there that will give them 2 weeks training in an existing restaurant and then sets them off on their own. And that's not enough. I mean, you got to really work a restaurant, every position, 6 months maybe before you really should open your own doors.
Right, so. For sure. I have had a few people on the show who had zero restaurant experience, and they wanted to open a restaurant. So the way that they broke into the restaurant industry, so they're like usually people who have money, they were successful in other careers. They've always had this dream of opening their own restaurant. They never worked in a restaurant, so they join a franchise. So Chula is, I think, the name of the restaurant out of like Washington. Okay. It's an Indian restaurant franchise. But she bought into the Five Guys franchise, killed it, made another fortune, but also learned so much about the business of restaurants by using someone else's model and just getting in there. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I think this podcast has opened my eyes. I don't think the franchise model is one that I love, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think everything's as evil as I once did.
Sure.
I think there are benefits to different verticals of the industry.
My demonic look at franchises is really more from the menu side and from
sustainability
and the fact that it's the same menu everywhere you go, and it never changes.
Right.
It'll change maybe twice a year, but by adding a few special offers.
Is that because of your passion for food, or?
No, it's my definition of a restaurant. A restaurant should be local and should have sustainable products from the local area or not. It really doesn't matter. But the restaurant really needs to change its menu with season. Seasonality, I think, is very important. Product availability is very important. Creativity is very important, and it's not like everybody should be a Thomas Keller, which we'll get into later. I don't think that's a restaurant anyway. but there's something about that, that neighborhood feel, and that's what we've lost with franchises.
I 100% agree that generally speaking, the restaurant industry has become much more transactional.
Yeah. And
if you look at the history of restaurants, where the restaurant industry was born, maybe you can go as far back if you want to, like the Rome, or I think that's like the first records of restaurants. They were like 50 miles apart or something. Like that.
And there were street foods. Actually, that's all they were.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if you really want to go back, we could talk about anthropology and how like it was like like we use food for social status. Like trading and using food. Like sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the first real restaurants that we know as restaurants started in pre-revolutionary France, when they were just open to the nobility, and that was it. There were these small little chef-driven restaurants that would change menus, or they'd have one item, and that's the restaurant. But they were being sat at tables, they were being served their own portions, which prior to that, eating was more communal. They'd go to buffets, at their castles,
whatever you
or whatever.
Killed.
Yeah, whatever you killed, that's what you ate. But that whole model of the restaurant, has changed over the years. But that's the core right there, is the fact that there's a guy in the kitchen cooking what he loves to cook. Call him a chef, call him whatever you want, and he's got people coming in to eat that food because they like his food.
Yeah,
they like the decor. They like the ambiance, whatever, location.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I think so along this vein that we kind of lost what restaurants were, when you look at the United States, and I echo this a lot. Like, did you know that if you wanted to start a town in the United States, like in the, I don't know, maybe like the 16th century, maybe it was the 17th century or something like that. Like if you wanted to start a town, no, sorry, it was the 18th century, 1700s, during the 1700s, 18th century.
Yeah.
If you want to start a town, you needed to put a pub in.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
Like before a post office, before a church, It was a rule that you need to establish a public house.
Yeah.
Before you had a town, and that's where everything happened. And the people that owned those public houses, they were literally the mayors.
Yeah.
They were influencers. Yeah. They made change. They took care of their people. They were the center of that town, the center of that community.
Right. Right.
And I do agree with you that we've gotten so far away from that. But I think you're seeing it come back a little bit. People are starting to realize.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot more neighborhood restaurants going right now than really ever before. And fewer franchise restaurants in urban areas. Rural areas is another story, but there's a trend, I think, to want to have an exciting restaurant that is local, it's sustainable, it's creative. The chef or whoever is in the kitchen doing whatever they like to cook, which is what the original restaurants were. That's the model I think the whole industry really needs to go to. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll get into why you think that's the way we have to go, but I do want to share your story.
Okay.
So you grew up in the restaurant industry. Two restaurant business podcasters, we're going to go down some tangents today. You grew up in the restaurant industry. Your dad owned a restaurant, right? You already talked about.
Yeah. He had it started with my grandfather. I've got a picture of him over there, standing at his bar in 1918.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been in the family for a long time. But at my dad's restaurant, I'd be picked up at school by my mom and driven to the restaurant. And there I made the little cups of coleslaw or filled the barbecue sauce cups. Every once in a while, he'd let me bread the chicken for the roasted chicken. But after that, I wanted to get into theater and film in high school, and was on my way until New York University denied my acceptance. So I went to my next best love, and that was cooking. And went to an apprenticeship for a year, and worked in a couple of restaurants. Was elevated way too fast to the word chef, way before I was ready. The first restaurant I did was called Tango, and it was kind of a seafood restaurant, done in the French style. And the owner was very forgiving of what I did to run the kitchen for a while.
How old are you at this point?
23.
Very forgiving of what I did to run the restaurant. So what do you mean by that?
Well, because I didn't run it very well. I created a great menu with some great food, but I couldn't produce it all the time. The restaurant would get busy and the kitchen would collapse.
Right.
The couple of days before I actually left, I had forgotten to order produce.
Oh, man.
But I had dreamt that I ordered the produce.
Oh.
So I'm sitting around all day doing prep and stuff and waiting for the produce guy to arrive. Finally, I call him in the afternoon and say, well, no, where's the stuff? He said, you never placed an order.
Oh, so you'd think that they would call if they had a regular customer. Like, you never placed
an order. Yeah, but they didn't. Yeah. And so it finally came, and we finally got ready. But the real camel, the straw that broke the camel's back, was one Saturday night. The wait staff was just abusive because food wasn't coming out. And I was working the line, and one server, I forgot her name, was just yelling at me. I mean, like berating me completely. And I had a coquille Saint-Jacques, which is scallops in a cream sauce and a little coquille shell. And I said, okay, this is enough. Just flipped it up, landed on the ceiling, sauce side up, so it's stuck there. And I just walked off the line.
And this was your first?
It was my first chef job.
First chef job.
Yeah, yeah.
So reflecting, I mean, one of the things I like to do, reflecting back, I mean, what advice would you have given yourself during this time, knowing what you know now?
Not to hire me as a chef. Maybe a sous chef at best, but here I was in the early 70s, and I was the only guy, or very few guys, who had actual formal training. Most guys were just being trained on the job. The guys with formal training were these kind of snooty Europeans. They were French, they were Swiss, they were German. And they were concentrated mostly in hotels. So to have that opportunity to be a chef so young, I grabbed it. And then Rich Melman brought me on to Let Us Entertain You just as a consultant, where I'd create dishes for him. Or he'd send me to a restaurant to steal a dish, find out how it's made and bring it back to him. And we did a couple of research trips like that. But then I fell into that pattern of being a chef again and was named their executive chef, first one they've ever had.
Were you still 23 when he was contracting you out to go
25.
around? 25. So a couple years after.
A couple years, yeah.
Got it.
So, after my first experience as a chef and being asked to be executive chef for Let Us Entertain You, I said, sure, why not?
Right. So that was your first chef job, was this job that you told us, where you weren't able to reproduce the food consecutively, but the food was amazing. If you got busy, though, forget about it.
Right.
The second chef job you had was executive chef under one of Rich Melman's restaurants.
Right.
Where did you learn how to become an amazing chef? Was it just because of this family that you grew up in?
Excuse me.
Here, take your time.
The chef I apprenticed under was John Snowden. And John was very well known in Chicago because he kept opening these, what essentially are pop-ups today, but illegal restaurants. He would never get licensing and put them in some weird locations. I've got some friends who grew up in Old Town where one of his restaurants was, and he was remembered for two things. The restaurant was an all-soup restaurant, which Jacques Pepin did many, many years later. And he had these two beautiful Afghan hounds that he'd walk up and down. So they remembered seeing this exquisite-looking hounds with this very regal-looking. He was African-American with a big white beard. Actually, he was half Mexican. And when I found him, he had moved to the suburbs and he had a French cooking school. And it was called Du Ma Père, l'École de la Cuisine. And it named after Dumas the Elder, who also wrote an encyclopedia about food besides Three Musketeers.
Wow.
Anyway, that was his idol. So I worked for him pretty much night and day for a year. I'd have to get in at 5, 6 a.m. to make the quiche or the croissant or whatever and get the kitchen ready for the lessons. Then after the lessons, I had to wash up and get the kitchen clean again, walk his dogs, feed them their very special diet that I had to cook for them. And then we'd be on to it again by the afternoon and evening. So my day would start around 5 or 6.
So you're doing 2 or 3 pop-ups a day?
No, this is just for the cooking school.
Oh, the cooking school.
By the time I was done for the day, it was like 10, 11 o'clock. So I worked from 5 to 11. And then I'd go home, sometimes grab a beer on the way home, sometimes not. And at 4:30 in the morning, the phone would ring, and that would be John, making sure I was awake. And I'd drag myself in and do it all over again. So after a year of that, we decided I was done, and I really needed to kind of move on. I didn't really learn a whole lot about the restaurant business, but learned just a lot about cooking and about French food, classic French food. And then from there, the lettuce and rotini started. After lettuce, I was the first executive chef for the Pump Room, which was his first foray into upscale dining, and totally made a mess of that one too. Came up with some good items for the menu. We had a woman who was our consultant for the menu, Alma Locke, who kind of helped me along the way.
So we fast forward. We went from when you first really chopped, or I would say sharpened the saw on your cooking skills.
Right.
Then you were your first executive chef, and now you're back at you're 25 again. That's where we are in the timeline.
Well, by the time I got to the Pump Room, it was like 26. Yeah,
gotcha.
Just a year later.
Got it.
But again, I made a crap show out of it because, again, I couldn't get the food out. My payroll was too high. My food cost was too high. And Rich made a great offer to me that I really should have taken. He had hired Gabino Solatino, who was the chef at Le Perroquet in Chicago. Great French restaurant.
What was the offer? I'm curious. I'm dying.
Well, he said, if you stay with me and work with Gabby, you can be his sous chef, and we'll teach you a lot, and you'll get better.
The stuff that you were struggling with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Gabby came in, and the restaurant started running like a breeze.
You didn't have a problem cooking.
No.
You had a problem with the systems and processes behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The consistency, the profitability,
right.
The P&Ls, things like that.
And consequently, Richard's promise to Gabby was if he came in to straighten out the Pump Room, he'd open a restaurant for him. So Gabby took it. Anyway, as a dumb-ass 26-year-old with an ego too large for himself, declined. I said, no thanks, I want to go off on my own. That was a stupid measure. But I did and started doing some consulting.
In case we didn't spell it out enough, why was that such a dumb idea? What would you have gotten from that experience?
I would have gotten all the business training and made better decisions down the road.
Yeah.
Which kind of crept themselves into some of the consulting I did, and then into my own restaurants as well. Yeah. I was getting better at it, but it still wasn't as fine-tuned as I needed to get. As fine-tuned as Rich Melman does for his restaurants.
Yeah, and you're making me think of this interview I recently just did with Gavin Kaysen.
Oh, sure.
And when I was interviewing him, I was expecting to have like this long story of like leading into opening his restaurant, where he climbed the ladder and eventually got a job working at Daniel Boulud's restaurant.
Yeah.
And then he went and opened his own place. Mm-hmm. He worked in 2 restaurants from the time he graduated culinary school to the time he opened his own restaurant. One was a place in San Diego. I can't remember what it was called. And the second restaurant, where he spent 8 years with Daniel Boulud's restaurant.
Right.
And then he went to open his own place.
Right.
But in the first restaurant he worked at, it was a restaurant in a hotel.
Okay.
So you know that he wasn't doing P&Ls and all that other shit.
Sure.
He was just doing the creativity food part of things.
Right.
So he really only worked in one restaurant, one true restaurant, before going on to open what he's done and created with Soigné.
Well,
but it goes to show the importance of going to work for people that are going to teach you
Danielle, I'm sure, probably taught him some, but Danielle's restaurants are divided. He's got his culinary team, and he's got his business team. Gavin, more than likely, and I haven't talked to Gavin about this, but worked mostly with the culinary team and maybe dabbled a little bit with the business team. And that's why most big chefs do their restaurant models.
Yeah. But I think if you want to open a restaurant, unless you have the people behind you that the counter you, right, the compliment you, you're not going to be successful. There's more than creativity that's involved, like you've proven in your story.
Yeah.
But he was very intentional about asking the finance people. He's like, how do I move the numbers? How do I manipulate this? So he knew that he had it. So he was surrounded by the world's best.
Yeah.
Like financial people. When it comes to fine dining and profitability.
Right.
Which is a hard nut to crack. Anyway, I digress.
Okay.
But,
see, I didn't know that part of it. So.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It just goes to show, like, to use your come up as it's an education. That's really what you're focusing on, is learning. But continue your story. So you were talking about how you turned down this opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
There were multiple opportunities for you to go be a SOO or a CDC or something like that, but you want to do your own thing.
Right. Well, the consulting went actually kind of well for many years. And then I was brought up here to do a concept called Winfield Potters by a couple of brothers who had this great location. That's one of theirs, Rupert's.
Okay, I was just admiring my mug, Rupert's American Cafe.
And anyway, that was like early '80s, and it was a fern bar, more or less. It was done on the model of TGI Fridays, Bennigan's, that were just getting started at that point. And I created a great menu for them. They had this massive salad bar, which was a thing back then. That I put things like herring and chopped liver and caviar and all kinds of things out there that nobody had ever seen on a salad bar before. And then help them create desserts and some drinks as well. But the act of doing all that convinced them that they needed to hire me full time and come in and run their kitchen. Well, by then I'd learned a lot more. So I was able to run a decent kitchen.
What were the key elements that you learned that you think you were missing before? Like, what were you doing differently now?
Creating dishes that weren't too complex.
Okay.
First of all, dishes that I could prepare to a point where finishing would be 15 minutes or less, and then creating a team, a regiment, so to speak, of people in the kitchen that had specific jobs and knew how to do them well, and was able to cut down on the amount of employees I needed as well, even though like I was making pasta and I was doing some baking. So
you started cooking for volume.
Yeah.
Realizing that it might be the best dish possible, but if I can't recreate it consistently or do it fast with 3 turns a night, then nobody's going to come back. Right. So simplicity, keeping it simple, stupid. But I think there's another layer there that you mentioned about cooking things to the point where you can finish it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, right.
So you're doing most of your cooking during the day.
Well, not when you open for lunch. You're doing it all day long. Let me take an example here for you. The scallops. We had a scallop dish at Winfield Potters, which was pretty easy to do. It's just sauteed scallops in a mustard cream sauce with black olives as a garnish. Well, originally I was doing the cream sauce with mustard in every pan with the scallops. After sauteing the scallops, taking them out, finish the sauce. Until I realized all I had to do was just saute the scallops and pour the sauce over the top. There it goes. And it lost a little bit of that seafood flavor to it, but not enough to really ruin the dish at all.
Got it. So these little just tricks of the trade that compound over time that you can only pick up through experience.
Right.
So take your train of thought from there. So you started getting to the point where you were better, you had new skills. Yeah. You were better at cooking for volume.
Mm-hmm. So we had done Winfield Potters. I moved up here, went back to Chicago in the late 80s to do some consulting because I had people calling me. And at that point, the guys up here weren't really interested in doing anything new for a while. So we agreed that if they wanted me, they'd call me back, which they did again in about 1990. And when we opened that joint,
your place?
Rupert's American Cafe.
Got it.
They had a property in a suburb that was their own pizza joint called My Pie, which is a franchise out of Chicago. And the other half of the building was a buffet restaurant called the Jolly Troll, Swedish buffet, and had been there for like 15, 20 years, but they were leaving. So they took over that space to create a nightclub. I had already introduced them to Rich Melman and Spiro Zakis, the designer for lots of things that Rich did. So they made a deal with Rich to help them open this joint. And Rich had just opened a Rupert's in Arlington Heights in Chicago, and was going very well. Now, Rupert's concept was like a 10 or 12 piece live orchestra that played contemporary music, and 3 to 4 singers that would do all the singing as well. And then a dance floor and drinks and drunks and all that kind of stuff that goes with the nightclub.
Sounds like a good time.
It was. Well, we opened the same concept here. The Rupert's held about 400 people. I think it was huge.
This is the first restaurant that you own.
No, this is still with the Webb brothers.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, where I was an executive chef. But when they called me back in 1990, I then became the general manager of the restaurant part of that deal, and the executive chef as well.
Knowing what you know now, do you think you would have tried to structure those partnerships differently?
Yeah, probably.
What would you have done differently?
Ask for more money.
Yeah. I mean, what's the percentage?
We
can't talk in dollar bills because it's not really transferable 30, 40 years later, but like percentage, what do you mean?
Well, ask for a piece of the joint, so that I know I'd owed 10% or whatever, sweat equity, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that might have helped, but when those businesses crashed, I got nothing. So
right.
Yeah, one of the things that happened to me over my lifetime is I finally realized I didn't care about money. I was way into the food and the development of a restaurant, conceiving it, building it. That was more
paying homage to what your vision of a restaurant should be,
or helping somebody else do theirs.
Yeah.
And that was way more important than the amount of money. Sure, I needed money to survive and had a couple of 6-figure years, but mostly I've been struggling money-wise my entire life because I didn't matter. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there's also something to be said about the fact that money is like crack.
Mm-hmm.
You can never get enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs to be, I mean, in my experience, like when I resigned from aviation, I started listening to all these podcasts about, there's so much emphasis on like becoming rich.
Right.
And I think that it's like American culture. We value money status so much. But what we know to be true is that like you will never have enough, and it's almost a sickness.
Yeah.
And like to achieve like peak happiness, they say the average American needs to make about $70,000 to $80,000.
Yeah. Because
at that level, as long as you live a modest lifestyle, you can your threats are eliminated.
Right.
You have health care, you have a safe place to lay your head, you literally have everything you need to be happy. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an important message, Yeah,
it is. Even though there are people at that earning level that overspend, they'll put themselves way into big debt because they want $70,000-$80,000 car instead of the $35,000 or $40,000, which they can afford.
And that $80,000 car is going to be just like any other car after a week of owning it.
That's right.
You're going to forget what you're in. It's special for a day.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or the shopping is special too.
Right. But it's a part of the culture. I think it's consumerism.
Yeah.
It's part of this culture that we've established, which, like the mission to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. I think that the industry is going to transform the world. It's going to help people reconnect with what matters.
We really want to get into that?
Yeah.
Right now? Okay.
You don't think so?
No. What kind of? But transforming the industry is the hard part.
Yes.
Before we get into transforming the world. Restaurants really need to be a business and looked on as a business, not only by the ownership, but by the consumer.
Yes.
Which will then help them realize the fact that cheeseburger, even though they were paying $17 for it before, and now it's $20, that there's a reason for it. And right now, nobody sees that reason. They see it as greed.
or inflation or
whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really operating a good restaurant. Like I told you before, I did this spreadsheet to show what it would be like with a normal business operation right now, which gave it maybe a 4% profit, which is what most restaurants are working at these days. But then by a 23% increase in prices, which would cover tipping and more money for labor to allow a lot of pay equity go on, which doesn't go on now. They had a profit of about 11-12%. Because there was more money to play with, they could do a lot more too.
And you could attract onto yourself the people you need to do what you are doing well.
Yeah,
which is a big part of it.
Yeah. But that's the scary part for owners, is taking that leap of faith that allows them to raise the price, set a pay scale that is good for everybody in the restaurant, which, by the way, I think they'll start seeing more really committed people coming into their restaurant to work than happens right now. Because even cooks, servers, whatever, is a side job.
Right.
They're here to make money while they're on the way to do something else. But in Europe, a guy takes a job as a waiter, he's going to be a waiter the rest of his life. And he'll be getting paid well to do that.
Right.
Without tipping.
And I think it's important to point out that it's not easy to be a good waiter.
Not everybody. Not at all.
Not a lot of people. It's such a looked down upon career.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
When it's so ironic because it's so difficult. You look at somebody who's like a data entry specialist, right? Where they just literally have to, enter in numbers. And that's more respected than somebody who has social, emotional, memory, just being able to read a room, being able to remember all the ingredients and like a constantly changing menu. I can't do it. I'll be honest. I can't do it. I'm not a good server. I could be a server in certain places, but I know that I'm not a server at a 4-star restaurant.
No, it's multitasking at its highest because they got to do everything all at once. It wasn't too long ago that cooks and chefs were looked as the lowest end of the lowest end of the pile of people.
Dishwasher.
Yeah, well, dishwashers didn't exist in anybody's mind. There was just this guy in the kitchen. What changed was Food Channel and modern magazines like Bon Appetit, Savour, who started looking at the people in the kitchen as idols, as people who are doing these amazing things with food.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes.
Good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, it's good and bad.
Why is it a good thing?
Well, because it brings into focus what food should be. It doesn't have to be a burger that's 8-10 inches high with a lot of slop on it. It can be just a regular burger, like a 4-inch burger with very good ingredients.
Yeah.
And that's something I think people are just starting to learn right now. And it's a bad thing because it puts focus on the idolatry, let's call it, of the business.
I like to call it the consumer side of the business.
Yeah.
The part of the industry that the industry wants you to see.
Right.
The facade that we're creating to create an experience for you.
Yeah.
But it's not the reality.
No.
Of what's happening. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we're in this trouble is because we've created this we talked about it, I think when it was off air, where we've conditioned the consumer to think that a burger costs $5. Right. So that's part of it. But the other part of it is this media is telling this narrative of how romantic the restaurant industry is. And people get drawn to that romance who want to make a career out of this, and then they get involved in it and they realize that's not it at all. What's going through your mind?
Well, there's the popularity of certain chefs too that draw people to them, like Daniel Boulud and Thomas Keller, Gavin Kaysen even. And what happens is without the oversight of the business, and you're only looking at these small, actually very small places to learn how to be a chef or how to learn how to cook. You have to do a great commitment only because to get into those places, you need to stage or work for free. Some are very short, couple of week positions. Some are years long. At Thomas Keller's, some of his interns have working with him for about a year, unpaid, which allows Thomas to actually make money in the restaurant and have the size crew that he needs.
I have so many conversations. Did I bring to this conversation the recording about how I didn't think fine dining was profitable?
Well, a little bit. Yeah,
I mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is how they're profitable by
not paying people.
Yeah. They are paying people, and I think that's the argument. They're paying people with knowledge and experience.
Oh yeah. Oh sure.
And let's be honest, if you can hit your name to Thomas Keller, that's gonna open doors for you.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No. But for a long time it did.
For a long time it did.
Yeah.
When the guy in Denmark, I forgot his name now, closes his restaurant, Nomi. That's what should happen to all restaurants.
All restaurants should close.
No. All. I don't. Like I said, I don't know if you remember. I don't think those are restaurants. Those are artist galleries.
Right.
And these people are working at a very high level of creativity, with food that is, it's local, sustainable, it's beautiful, and these very odd dishes, and it's more an experience of food rather than a restaurant that's really meant to be a joining place of eating good food, conviviality, in a good atmosphere.
And let's be honest, people want to show the world how cool they are at this restaurant. It's a status symbol.
Well, it is a status symbol too, but
psychographics all the way, brother.
But again, that was done by the PR people or the magazines that drank the Kool-Aid and are doing it. I watched a movie last night called The Menu. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't. But I avoid movies sometimes because they can create such a false. But I think Hollywood's starting to catch up with the true storyline.
And that's what this is. This is the true storyline of what those high level restaurants are, mixed with this very freaky kind of horror thing going on.
I have to watch it.
Yeah, it's a very good movie.
There was a movie on Netflix. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a street cook. She was it takes place in Thailand. She was a street cook, working the wok, and somebody noticed her, like her talent, and they try to recruit her for like a fancy restaurant, and she goes for it, and then she just realizes like the bullshit. It's all bullshit. And what matters is cooking for people that you love and with people you love. So she ends up going back to her street cooking job.
One of the most honest things really about the business is The Bear. I don't know if you watched that series.
Yes, I did see that series.
It's exactly what it's like. You got a guy coming from a white tablecloth restaurant to his uncle's beef stand, which actually was my favorite place to eat.
Was it his uncle or his brother? Not that it matters. I think it might have been his brother.
Oh, his brother.
Yeah.
Sorry. But they filmed it at this place called Mr. Beef, which was my favorite joint to eat in Chicago. Would be there a couple of times a month. Anyway, he comes from that white tablecloth experience into basically a street food experience and tries to blend them together. And you see the frustration of him trying to do that, and there's a lot of family drama going on as well. But it really shows accurately what white tablecloth work is in a kitchen and what work in a beef stand is. And they're equally difficult, equally challenging, and equally hard. But one is done for one reason, which is artistry, and the other is done just to fill your face with the best tasting beef sandwich you ever had.
I resonate with the latter. Personally, I never got into fine dining. I don't even like going to fancy restaurants.
Well, yeah, I do just to kind of try it out and see what's going on. But I've even stopped doing that really since the mid '80s when fancy restaurants turned into these artistic galleries. That's something I just couldn't do anything about. You'd walk out hungry first of all, and the experience was good, but it was also pedantic. Let's call it.
What is the definition of pedantic?
I have no fucking clue.
I'm gonna look it up because
the chef was more interested in himself and the image that he was performing for the guests than the actually experience of a restaurant.
here's the definition.
Okay.
Of or like a pedant. So now I'm going to look up pedant. All right. A person who is excessively concerned with minor details and rules.
There you go.
Or with displaying academic learning. So it's about ego.
Yeah, so I picked that right.
Yeah. Okay.
All my book learning.
Yeah, I tend to feel the same way. But at the same time, this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned in nearly 1,000 episodes. There is no right way.
Right.
And when I started this podcast, my goal was to crack the fucking code, dude. I was like, well, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out the trick, the secret to becoming successful in the restaurant industry. And the more I learned, and I know I'm not alone here, the more I realized I didn't know anything.
Well, there is that. Yeah, that's true. But you're talking about some very minute details at that point. There are really only 3 rules to have a successful restaurant. And they're more than just location, location, location. Yes, location is very important. Ambiance is very important so that when the guest comes in, they have a pleasant experience of lighting and music. And it could be this simple breakfast furniture in a Chinese restaurant on Mott Street to polished woods and fine materials. And the last is good food. Well, actually, good food, good service is the third. But if you can conquer those 3, everything else will come along. The business side will come along if you've got some smarts of your own, or you bring the right people in to help you do that.
There's definitely some patterns that are solid, right?
Yeah.
But like to the point that I'm trying to make out, like it all depends on the person what are your goals? What is your vision? What are you trying to? Are you trying to be the pedant restaurant, that, or the artsy approach, where the art of it, the visual appeal is what you're going for, or are you trying to be the restaurant that offers the most value, or are you trying to be the restaurant that makes people feel the most welcome, or are you trying to be the restaurant that puts on the best show with like entertainment? There's a million different, so there is no right way. You know what I'm saying? That's one of the things. Or now we're talking about restaurant segments. Pop-ups versus quick, like fast casual, or quick service, or fine dining, or casual, or digital. Like what? Like how am I supposed to tell somebody what to do? You know what I mean?
Well, like I said, it really kind of it all has the commonality of good food. Yeah. If you do good food, you'll do well.
Right.
If you don't really care about your food that much and it's just okay, then you're not going to do well.
I mean, I could also argue that like, if you're good at promoting yourself, you'll do well.
Well, again,
as long as the food is okay and the consumer
is that
getting enough value. So like it could be good enough and you're offering great value, but you're really good at telling the world how great you are.
Yeah, and there's a guy in town, I'm not going to mention his name, who's doing exactly that. He's got 3 or 4 restaurants right now, maybe 5, that are just okay. They're not great. But he is looked upon as restaurant savant, and he's got all the right answers.
I'm totally asking you for the name after this recording.
After the recording, I'll do it too. There's that happens everywhere around the world, more so in America probably. But once we get to that point, then the whole idea of a restaurant is lost. There's no reason to go to a restaurant that the food is just okay, and the owner's doing it to create an image for himself,
right,
or his company or whatever. Once that is taken out of the equation and we get back to just restaurants are the place where you go for good food, you go for a great conversation with your friends, you go for entertainment if that's what the restaurant's offering, and it's in a good location, whether that means midtown or out in the suburbs somewhere. Those are all good locations. But all of that has to be in the commonality of what a restaurant is. And like I said, I think we've kind of we've gotten away from it. The PR people, magazine editors, and
social media,
influencers.
I hate being labeled as an influencer, but that's what the world tells me.
People's egos have drawn away from that. These restaurants that really, I can't call them restaurants anymore because they're not. Their food may be good, but it's artistically performed that nobody else at that level can perform. They're the only ones, which is great.
Yeah.
now Ferran Adria, who had Bulli in I think was it Barcelona or some small town in Spain, operated for many years on that level, and people were drawn to him. He was one of the first chemistry cooks. Created all the bubbles.
Gastroeconomy,
or
whatever it's called. Yeah. Is it not gastro? What's the molecular gastronomy?
Yeah. Willie Dufresne Wiley Dufresne does that here, and so does Gavin. Not so much, but there's nothing. There's nothing that I can say is the stamp, like you said, that this is a good restaurant. It has to have all of those pieces, whether you're serving a roasted duck or you're serving a single scallop on a heated rock from Maine or something.
I just realized we never took a break to thank our sponsors. So I got to make sure that happens. So we're going to do that right now. We'll come back and we'll continue this conversation.
Okay. We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now, Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below.
So we're officially back. I mean, I do want to share your story.
Sure.
Give us like the highlighted version, and then we'll get back to kind of the state of the industry today, how there is no standard that I've like the kind of can continue this thought that we were on. But bring us back to when you like kind of paint that picture and just do it like in a speedboat.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, when I came back here in the 90s to open Rupert's Cafe, the nightclub and the restaurant, we also opened a world-class Italian restaurant called Cocolazzone. Got them all up and running, and some of the real estate things changed, and they had kind of changed the whole restaurant. So I pulled out and started doing consulting again. But also in the back of my mind, looking for somebody to help me open a restaurant, a little angel investor.
You at this point, Mitch Melman or Rich Melman, right?
Yeah.
You weren't interested in working with him?
I never really thought about it because that was my past. Yeah.
So you have this dream, this vision that's forming in you that you want to open your own place.
Yeah. And I find an angel investor to help me do it. I had a great location that I had in mind, a small little basement restaurant, actually, that Buca de Peppo started in. They got it before I did. But then I found one right next to the Target Center, our big basketball stadium. And this investor loved that. He thought we'd just kill it. So we opened that, and that only lasted about 3 years because the city took the property as, the domain thing, whatever that is, which we knew was coming.
Eminent domain.
Which we knew was coming, but we thought we'd be part of it. But he sold it before, like months before it. We were almost there. And I had some sweat equity percentage, but nothing had been vetted yet. I wasn't there where I could actually claim that I was a part owner. But the restaurant was named after me, and it was a old class supper club with flocked wallpaper. And then from there, went back to consulting, did that for a couple more years. And then in 2015, I got the vision to do a hot dog tavern, a hot dog restaurant. Hot dogs that were just starting to kind of come into the mainstream. But coming from Chicago, hot dogs had been part of my life forever.
Is Nate's Hot Dogs up this way? Does that sound familiar? Nate's Hot Dogs?
No.
He was a past guest. I knew he was in the Midwest, North. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no. The Portillo's guys are up here right now, which, anyway. So we took my partner, who's a great chef, wanted to do some sausage as well. So we were manufacturing our own sausages, doing some very unique hot dogs, like one with truffle gravy and all sorts of things. And it went kind of well, but we were in a location that really didn't have great parking. You had to go park in a lot, which was half a block behind the restaurant. So that was okay in the summertime, but nobody wanted to take that trip in the winter. So the winter we died. Then there was road construction, which is really what killed my restaurant downtown. And then we got on Triple D, which I thought was very exciting, and that would change our fortunes completely. Did nothing.
Really?
Yeah. We were busy for a couple of weeks, and then it went right back to what our business level was before.
This is 2015, 16?
This is 16 by
16?
Now. Yeah.
I think Triple D had its heyday.
Yeah.
And it was in like the earlier, like before cell phones really came in, like when TV was still the way you found out about things.
Sure.
Where Triple D was going. If you were on Triple D in the early days, it would
Guaranteed.
Yeah, you would get skyrocketed.
Right.
Because people would fly to you to like, and like, but I think once the internet kind of picked back up and once Triple D was into a few seasons, it definitely it will impact your business, but not like it used to.
Well, it's funny. They still replay that episode. And every time they replay it, I'll get a phone call from somebody.
Yeah.
Or they'll put a comment up. I kept the Facebook page open just for that kind of stuff. So that's interesting.
Is this hot dog concept still going?
Nope.
When did it close?
2017.
Okay.
Landlord wouldn't readjust my rent because it was a little high, and I was a little too confident when I signed the lease. And all I wanted to do was reduce it to percentage rent for a while, and then we'd get back to something else. And he was too set on his ways. So we made it through the Cubs' victory, which was good. It was a good couple of weeks for me. In fact, on the final night of the series, I had people standing out on the sidewalk watching the game through the front windows, drinking and eating out there with no permit, but they were doing it. So that was a fun night. But finally we had to close. And after that, I went back to consulting again. And we're basically here today. Now, right about 2018 is when I discovered podcasting. And I started doing it.
I saw somewhere that you started in 2014. So that's not accurate because I know you've been around for a while.
Yeah, not podcast. Podcasting started in 2018, 2019, something like that.
Yeah. And what was your objective with the podcast?
To get more business, get some consulting business. But also, this thing about telling stories had always been a part of me, part of my time as a student getting into theater or film. I love the storytelling. And I knew there were some great stories in the restaurant business. So the first podcast I called Legends and Lies of Launching a Restaurant.
I noticed you dropped the lies.
I dropped everything, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because launching the Legends and Lies of Watching a Restaurant, I thought was too specific. There might be 10 guys who really want to hear that story. So then it became I think we were right into Restaurant Legends after that. Because I talked to a podcasting consultant and said, if you put restaurant in the name, you'll get more hits. So I did. And, I was doing, 4 or 5 interviews a month and posting almost every week. But, my money was starting to run out from consulting and I needed to find real work. So I was doing some more consulting a little bit, but kept coming back to the podcast, hoping I could get enough listenership. No, and back then my listenership was like 80. Yeah, 20 guys I probably knew anyway. And then the bug really hit me. I thought this is going to be a career, and I want to make it a career.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I love what I have to pinch myself sometimes. It's hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think people think podcasting is a lot easier than it really is. Not everyone's good at it.
Right.
Right. And I think I have a lot to learn, but I'm a lot better than I was when I started 1,000 episodes ago.
Yeah, you got to learn. My brother and sister-in-law are both journalists, and I had them start listening to it, and she said, "Now you're just a great interviewer because you let people tell their story."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've learned.
Yeah, and I mean, you're also super knowledgeable about the industry too.
Yeah.
You have a whole career in the industry.
Right.
So hopefully after today's episode, there's a new wave of podcast listeners
that's
that
what I'm
come
doing
your way. So where's the best place to find the podcast? Not that we're at the point of, but I want to make sure people know in case they don't stick around to the end. Where do you find it?
Well, it's on every stream, so that's easy to find. You just search for Restaurant Legends. The website for it is restaurantlegends.com. And what else do you need besides those two?
Yeah, that's exactly all you need.
Right.
I do want to come back to what we were talking about earlier. I want to make sure we got your story out and we came to where we are today. And one thing we started talking about is how the industry is just so diverse now.
Yeah.
And one of the things you were hoping we would discuss in today's conversation is just how the world of like casual dining in Fern bars have just changed so much in the past 50 years.
Right.
I kind of think it's a good thing that the restaurant industry is diversified.
Oh,
and
sure.
That there used to be like you were a restaurant, like the way you defined it, and then it evolved into quick service and fast casual over time.
Right.
And now it's just like there's so many. It comes in so many different business models, whether it's like pre-made meals, or I think that you can do so much more with private chefing because of technology. Like,
and there's more cultural activity in it than there ever has been before.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you can find restaurants that are Thai, that are Vietnamese, that are Korean. A lot of different Asians.
I'm about to go interview a Hmong restaurateur.
Yeah, a Hmong restaurant. Well, Ye Vang is an interesting guy, and he, even though he really hasn't had that much business in the restaurant, he's a very good cook.
I mean, I think 2019 is when he opened his first place.
Yeah, and I don't think that's still open. He's got a pop up.
Is it Hi? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
the street food.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got another one with noodles. I forgot. But anyway. There's those kind of things, a lot of different Mexican and South American. There's Argentine restaurants, Venezuelan.
The American palate's definitely.
Yeah, I know there's more Southern food. There's some New England influences. I think Portland, Oregon was a great influence to the rest of the country because it showed people how to do local food and do it well and do it simply and do it affordably. So there are so many tiny little elements now of what a restaurant can be, and that's the way it should be.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be that same model like it was back in the mid 70s, up until the mid 70s.
The model's broken.
The operating model is broken.
Yeah, the operating model is broken.
Yeah.
What's the part of that model that's not broken?
It's not.
Well, when I say the model, I'm talking about the model of. If you're opening a restaurant, if you're going to any publication on how to open a restaurant, and they give you the step by step. But if you're doing 10%, you're doing great.
Right.
Where whatever's left over is yours.
Right.
Or just I don't know, like prime costs. Like the formula, I think, is broken generally.
Yeah. It's how that formula is approached. What the revenue source is. That's what's kind of broken right now.
Yeah. Okay, that's a better way to put it.
There's a lot of ownership out there who don't trust P&Ls. They won't even look at one. If they have money in the bank, they're doing good. When they're run out of money, something's wrong.
Right.
And that's a very simple way to look at the restaurant. But for hundreds of years, that's the way anybody ever looked at the business of a restaurant was what was in the bank. Now people are getting more analytic about what to do with the money, where it has to go, and where it has to come from.
So one thing that I know is near and dear to your heart, just from talking to you, is this idea of sustainability and doing things locally. And how do you make that profitable? What is the formula to doing value injected businesses with sourcing locally and taking care of your people? Have you cracked that code?
Like it's real simple.
What is it?
Just charge what you need to.
Yes.
If your chicken is $10 a pound, but the broadline distributor is $6 a pound, and you want the $10 a pound chicken, you're going to charge $20, $25 for that chicken dish. But if you're using broadline, you can charge $15. And that's what's important to you.
But I think what's more important to what's important to you is it's becoming important to the consumer.
Exactly.
And I think it's our job as restaurants, if we want to transform the industry, if we want to inject value into the industry, ethics into the industry, I think we need to communicate to the consumer. Listen, like, trust me, you want this grass-fed, non-GMO, sustainably farmed cow.
Not as important how it tastes, though. If that cow tastes good and is also all those things, that's a plus.
But people don't. I think people eat emotions. They eat. You know what I'm saying? Like, how's another way to say this? Not eat emotions, but like,
kind of
psychographics.
Yeah.
What does eating here? What does being seen eating here say about me and my values?
Yeah. Okay.
People care about that,
yeah.
And also, people are selfish. People started spending more money on food when they realized the food that they put into their body makes them feel better.
Sure.
You know, so now there's something in it for me.
Right.
You know, I want only organic, all this stuff, because I know that people are selfish. Let's be honest. Like, what's in it for me?
Right.
You know, you're charging, like, you're going to not get cancer. That's what's in it for you.
Well,
you know,
not necessarily that, but
you know,
you're going to feel good.
Your odds
when you're done,
and you're going to feel good. But now they're starting to realize too, with like, even it's like, what is it? I had this thought, I lost it, but I think regenerative farming, and like all this stuff, we're starting to realize that the way we treat the planet and like it's all connected. Right. So if we want to have a world where the world's healthy, the world's healthy, we're all healthy, it starts with the way. It starts with our relationship with planet Earth. Yeah. Right. So like, I'm thinking about like mono farming right now.
Oh, okay.
Like, you see all these people who are like, oh, like, stop killing cows, stop eating cows, eat meat because it's better for the environment. Right. Growing billions of pounds of soybeans is not good for the environment. Like, I'm sorry. Like, what's going through your mind as I'm saying this?
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. There's, like I said, for me, it's all about the end result of how the food tastes, and whether it's soybeans from a 60-acre farm or soybeans from a 5-acre farm that's sustainable and organic or whatever. As long as it tastes good and tastes better than the big product, that's good.
But sorry.
Well, and then in like, let's take beef as an example. Grass-fed beef doesn't always taste good because of what they're eating and where they are in their lifespan before they're slaughtered. But a cow that was eating grass for most of its life and then spends a couple of months eating grain develops better flavor and better fat. And environmentally, I think that's still okay if you're going to eat beef, because at least you're going to eat a product that has been raised in a very conscious way by letting them eat grass all the time. And it creates a product that you want to consume. You know, you want to crave it because it tastes so good.
Right. But I think the more we learn, we're starting to realize that the better our relationship with food is, as far as trying to recreate the natural order, like trying to be the Amazon, you know. We should all think like Mayans. You know what I'm saying? Where like we coexist with food, and like the idea of a centralized food system, there's no reason why people should be hungry.
No.
And you know what I'm saying? Like the challenges we face. I mean, but we're starting to realize that the closer food is to the natural order, the better it is. And I think that there's something to be said about what is that doing when we're eating this type of food that's like elk is so good for you. Wild, like foraging, like mushrooms, all these foods that grow in like in a natural setting, we're realizing are so good for you. So I think that when you make it about, where I'm going with this to come full circle, is that if you educate the consumer about how their purchasing dollars can impact their future. And here's the thing, if people start wanting that stuff, the price is going to go down because more people are going to get into the business.
Exactly.
So like it all starts with the consumer. And like literally, like for the longest time, the consumer has just been manipulated by corporate America, saying this is what you need, this is what you want. But we're starting to fucking see through that shit. So I think it's the restaurant industry that needs to be the influencer and say, wake up. Wake the frig up. You know, like, you consumer, if you start putting your money in certain directions, the market will follow. and we can live in a better world. But stop bitching and start making decisions and have better values, have better priorities. Sorry, this is your time to shine.
Okay. I don't hear the bitching, but I do see the result of wanting more organic product and more sustainable product. And it's not being heard by a lot of restaurateurs, unfortunately. The ones that hear it, I think, are the successful ones right now. But the thing that kind of turned my life around in how I look at food was my first trip to Italy, where I ate this chicken dish that didn't taste like chicken that I was used to. It was better because it had scrapped in a barnyard until it was slaughtered.
Bugs and grubs.
Eating bugs and maybe some other feed as well. The biggest revelation was the tomato. Tomatoes in Europe taste totally different than the tomatoes here because they don't have to travel thousands of miles to the restaurant. They're grown in town or near town. And when they're not in season, you don't use them. In America, when a tomato's out of season, you're getting it from another part of the world that is in season. Yeah.
Which is another big issue, the amount of carbon footprint we have. So you can have your bananas every morning.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me started.
But that's a result of other things, the depression and just how our American society developed over the years.
One thought I've played with is this idea. Like I think we could live in a world where food and shelter is free. I'm not a socialist.
Yeah, you are.
Hear me out.
Okay.
Food and shelter are the biggest expenses for most people.
Yeah.
You eliminate that. Think about how much food we throw away.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how many empty freaking buildings there are right now.
Mm-hmm.
If we solve that problem, we free up so much more additional revenue to be spent on experiences and stuff like this. Food, shelter, and travel.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you make those three things, pretty much if you're a citizen, you eliminate so much expense and stress, and you provide a lot of security for people.
Yeah.
If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's food is the most important thing, like surviving, and then after that, security, feeling secure, shelter.
Right.
And being able to get to your job and stuff like this.
Well, I'd add education to that as well.
In education.
Yeah. Education,
but I feel like in today's world that's already free.
Kind of, not really.
Well, we have access to information.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
Like we have the internet.
All right.
Like, but anyway,
Yeah.
so if we do that, and then we, instead of moving food to people,
right,
we move people to food.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And then we have a whole economy that's hinged on hospitality and just treating people, travelers, and growing our food locally and feeding it to them straight off the friggin' plant. Like, you want this? Come and get it, and then take some home.
It's a little too noble, but I get it.
I don't know. I feel like that's a really cool vision for the future.
It is. It is a cool vision, but that's going to be harder to get to than getting the consumer to understand he's going to spend $5 more on this dish.
Yeah, we're short-minded.
Yeah,
we look 5 minutes from now, not 5 years from now.
Well, it's step by step. I'm going to change subject here, and that's the way the gun laws are going in this country.
Yeah,
we're going step by step to get to where we need to, which is banning pretty much all guns. But no, they want to fix the mental health issue. They want to fix the background issue. Yeah, you need to fix those, but there's more. And hopefully by fixing these two issues, we can start approaching the other issues as well. And that's the same thing with food. We attack the problem of getting food to people, getting reasonably priced food to people.
Healthy food to people.
Healthy food to people. Then they'll be better off, and they'll start making different decisions in how they buy, which then allow us to go on to other things that America needs.
I don't know. I think it's in reach because you think of the world we live in today, information is traveling faster than ever.
Yeah.
And people who didn't have the privilege, maybe they were illiterate 50 years ago because there were more people who couldn't read 50 years ago.
Yeah,
than there
sure.
are today.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So literally, and there's resources like this podcast. Information is flowing more free than ever before, which is one of the good things about the internet. That I'm somebody who bitches a lot about social media and the internet, but information is moving. So I think that we live at this time right now where like we are like, people are linear thinkers, but cultural evolution is exponential. And I think when you have the framing, the mediums through which to inspire people and make impressions on people, I think that there's going to be you're seeing it happen. Like, well, you talked about that. How much has the world changed as in the time that you've been in the restaurant industry?
It's changed several times.
Would you say in your experience in the past 10 years, it's changed faster, more expedited than ever before?
Not necessarily faster, but larger.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there are more kinds of restaurants operating today than there were 10 years ago. There are more people in the business that have gotten their place in that structure of the business that they deserve. Cooks becoming chefs, chefs becoming owners. But it's still, like I said, it's still that core of doing what you're supposed to do, and that's provide a great experience, whether it's dining, breakfast, lunch, whatever. Once you accomplish that, then the rest kind of falls in place.
Yeah, but as far as transformation, as far as the world changing, I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
72.
72. 72. You started when you were 15 years old.
Sure, let's call it that.
Nearly 60 years in the industry.
Sure.
Was there a lot of change in the industry from, say, 60 years? So you were working in the industry in the 70s.
Yeah.
From the 70 to like 95, how much did the industry change?
2 or 3 times actually. Because when I joined the world of restaurants full time in the 70s, there were 2 kinds of restaurants. Maybe 3. There was the small neighborhood diner. There was at that time, just the tiny segment of casual restaurants or fern bars, and then fine dining. And if I wanted to cook, those are my 3 opportunities. I stayed between the neighborhood restaurant and fern bars. I didn't go up to fine dining. And that really held its place until, I'd say, early 80s in that area, when casual restaurants exploded and became really our main focus on the restaurant business. White tablecloth restaurants were still there, but they weren't opening as often. And there were always neighborhood restaurants, diners, and whatever, which I'm glad to see.
So from like the 80s to 2005?
No.
Would you say casual dining was the predominant business model at that point?
Well, it still is. I mean, fine dining is going away, and casual restaurants are taking over. Yeah. Whether they're culturally different or American or whatever, that segment of dining is
fine casual.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, they're becoming the norm for restaurants right now.
Yeah, where you're keeping the high quality food, but you're eliminating all the operational expenses around it.
Right.
You're taking the pretension out of it.
Right.
I just feel like I haven't been around as long as you have, so I can't I can't speak from your perspective, but it feels like in the past 5 years, you went from either your fine dining, your casual dining, your fast casual, your quick service, and that's it, or maybe your hotel, right? Can't leave that out. But in the past couple years, man, with the pandemic forcing people to evolve and step outside of the habits, just rinse and repeat, and realizing that, hey, like there's this digital asset that we can leverage to use for transactions. And I don't know, I just feel like people are starting to see like, I could do a membership model. Right. I can have a dog park where I serve food and alcohol and charge people a flat rate to come and just have access to all. Like, we're just starting to think better.
Yeah, well, bigger.
Yeah.
Not necessarily better, but more experimental, true. That's what eating has always been about, is trying to find a way to sell somebody food somewhere, doing whatever they're doing. If you want to bring them into a room that you're calling a restaurant, great. If you want to bring it to them in a food truck, that's totally viable and very successful for some people. The private chefing, like you mentioned before, is another way. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do it that are becoming acceptable now. Back in the early 90s, there were only a couple of ways to do it, and that was either a restaurant, or a restaurant. That's all you did. You didn't do any pop-ups. You didn't do food trucks. I think when I did the hot dog joint, we were one of the first businesses to do pop-ups, because in 2014 and 15, I was testing the concept by borrowing kitchens from some friends of mine and doing the restaurant, doing the what we thought would be a good menu for our restaurant. Not as large, because we had to kind of scale things down a little bit, but we probably did about 12 to 15 pop-ups before we actually opened our doors. And now everybody's doing a pop-up.
Right. I think pop-ups are the way to start. I think a restaurant doesn't start with a restaurant. It starts with your brand.
Right.
You can, for like $50, you can start a restaurant. If you think about the idea of where does a restaurant start?
Sure.
It doesn't start with a brick and mortar. It starts with putting it into the universe. This is what I want to do.
Well, that's the concept. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
but like the vision.
Right.
It starts with your vision. And today the cool thing is you can share that vision on so many different mediums.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
And all you need is a friend with a space that lets you use that space when they're closed. And then you can instantly tap into their POS and start using their infrastructure to get your food out. And then you start building your email list. You start building your following. You know, and people just don't think like this. Like, or they do now.
Yeah, no, they do now.
Talk to this girl in Charleston. I shouldn't call her a girl. Let's talk to this woman, 25 years old woman in Charleston. She started her muffin drop business where she makes gluten-free, dairy-free, basically anybody can eat these muffins.
Okay.
Muffins.
Sure.
And she's killing it out there. And
Yeah.
all she has is social Instagram.
Yeah.
And a website. She uses her Instagram account to drive people to her website where they order muffins. And she just goes to markets and she just has her little like wholesale retail muffin business. She
Well,
just pops.
during the pandemic, this great idea hit me, and I've just never really brought it to life. A frozen pizza that was delivered to a location that the customer had to come to get pre-ordered, and actually I was trying to debate whether frozen or just cooked and refrigerated, but
Par baked,
yeah. But do a deep dish Chicago style pizza that had this mystery of you have to order it ahead, and then we send you the location where you go pick it up, and it wouldn't be midnight pickups, but it would be convenient times for the consumer. And I worked on packaging and the name. I called it "That's My Pizza," because you point at something when you go pick it up. That's my pizza. And I thought it was still a pretty good concept. I don't know if I'm going to take it anywhere now, but I wouldn't have thought that way 10 years ago.
Yeah, and especially now with your podcast, you get to talk to people and open yourself up to perspective.
Well,
that's the other cool thing about
the
podcast is it gives you this door to like listen to people and their ideas and their perspective.
Exactly.
Speaking about listening to ideas and perspective, you did want to talk about tipping. I know that was a big part of what you wanted to talk about today. So I want to take one more quick break to thank our sponsors.
Sure.
We're going to come back, and we're not going to do a speed round. I'd rather use the 15 minutes we have left together to really kind of share your opinions on, because we are here to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And I think that your thoughts on tipping are part of the contribution to transformation. So we'll be right back.
We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below.
We're back. So a couple things you want to talk about are the new normal and tipping. So what do you mean by the new normal?
At the beginning of the pandemic, people were saying some very scary things. Somebody in this town, I'm not going to mention again, said it was a extinction event, and that restaurants will never reopen, or many restaurants will never open, and that's true. Some never did. But then there was there's this promise that once we come out of this, the restaurants will be a new normal. There'll be new ways to do things in restaurants. And everybody was kind of ganging up on that, saying, yeah. Well, we reopened, and people went right back to operating the way they always have. That whole new normal has not been realized on any large scale. There are a few restaurants here and there that are doing it.
When you say the new normal, be specific. What do you mean? What is the new normal in your opinion?
New normal is a different look at your operating strategy and what your operating costs are going to be. One is pay equity, and that's making sure that the guys in the kitchen are getting close to what the people on the floor are making. Now, the people on the floor are making $37, $47 an hour with all their tips. Guys in the kitchen never get to that point.
20 if they're lucky.
Yeah, well, 20, 25 now. But,
now, yeah.
At the time, they were 18. And tip sharing is something that didn't allow the cooks to take part in that. In Minnesota here, where we have no tip sharing whatsoever. Tip on the table belongs to the server. The server can decide what to do with it. If they want to share, great. If they don't, that's great. That doesn't exist in a lot of places. We get no tip credit either. Some places will take the minimum wage and cut it in half as a tip credit. But that's part of the new normal is either get rid of the tip credit and put it have every restaurant in the country operate with no tip credit, or make it a law that every state has to have a tip credit for restaurants especially. The government has gotten into the restaurant business in many ways, and that's the one that I think is the most invasive. So I was hoping that would be part of the new normal, that we'd get the government out of the business.
So when you say out of the business, you mean like removing these laws of tipping or whatever?
Yeah, removing the laws that help us run our businesses, and that they by having minimum wages that are maybe good for manufacturing.
They're old laws. They don't make sense anymore. They're antiquated.
Some are rarely new. The tipping thing in Minnesota is like in the early 80s, I think.
Yeah, but I feel like, and I think that's back to the example of how fast things are changing right now, where like they're just like they're not relevant anymore, right. and that we were all doing the same thing in the 80s. I feel like we're using the same model.
Oh, sure.
So now every restaurant used the same model, where now there's different models, and like get the heck out of our way, government. Like, you're slowing us down.
Exactly. And so that's what I was hoping would be part of the new normal. The other part would be the pay equity. The other part would be how pricing is very crucial to the restaurant, that owners have to stop subsidizing the diner by taking something that needs to be $18 and is now charging only $14 or $15.
Yeah. So this is episode 1001, I believe. It's going to be the episode number.
Oh, funny.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because episode 1000 is going to be my parents. And I haven't recorded that yet.
Oh, good.
But that's exactly what my parents struggled with. So the reason why I started this podcast is because I grew up 3 years old. The restaurant was my daycare.
Yeah, right. Right.
And I saw the lines out the door every weekend. I saw how happy they were, and how pleased they were, and how much love there was from my mom and my dad with the community.
Sure.
And I just remember thinking to myself, why do we struggle paying the mortgage? Mm-hmm. I have vivid memories of my mom crying at the kitchen table, trying to figure it out. And it's because they gave food away. My dad's portions of pancakes literally flopped over the sides of the plates, and they weren't small plates. Yeah. They loaded that plate with home fries, and he had a big appetite too. He was feeding the people the way he liked to eat. Yeah. And he was charging $1 less than everybody else because he didn't think that the location was good enough to draw people. Like, he thought people needed to know about the deal to come. So we were doing all this volume, but we weren't making any money on it, and we were giving away too much food.
Yeah, he wasn't alone.
His prices were lower, his portions were higher by a lot, and other than, but even it just goes to show that if you don't, charge what you're worth, if you don't do the menu engineering, if you don't know where every penny is going, if you're not doing the inventory, you know.
Well, I've talked to a few restaurant owners about that new normal as well. But one restaurateur said, if the guy down the street raises his prices, I'll raise mine. He's afraid to be the first one through the wall to raise the prices where they should be.
I don't think people care about 25 cents as much as restaurant owners think they do.
Well, but it's not 25 cents. It's
Let's
like
say it's
$2. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it's 25 cents, it's not that big a deal to anybody.
But if it's $2,
it's still, I don't think it'd still be any bother.
I agree with you.
Then they have to make, the guest has to make the decision whether I go to get this burger here for $25 or I go to get a lesser burger, not as good as this one, for $17.
It communicates quality, but the other thing that it's going to do is it's going to give you the resources you need to deliver the experience that your guests expect.
New normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we need to communicate to people.
Right.
Charge what menu engineering to figure out to the penny what it costs you.
Yeah.
Every variable you can goes into deliver the putting that plate on the table. What does it cost? And then tack on your percentage.
Oh, sure. And
you want to make 15%, tack on. You want to make 20%, it might start getting. If you want to make 40%, you might start running into some issues. But you can definitely beat 4%.
Yeah, and the data doesn't need to be that close. You can really just take whatever's on the plate, the center of the plate, whatever garnish or whatever vegetable goes with it. All you really need are those costs. The rest of the stuff is minutia, whether you use paper napkins or linen napkins, or you're paying your employee $20 or $25 an hour. All that will come. That'll be okay. It'll come into line. But once you understand, like you said, the cost of that dish, and charge for it accordingly, you're going to make a profit.
Yeah.
So, like, I've got this spreadsheet that you can put on your website as well.
Yeah.
It shows you what happens.
And if you're watching the video portion of this, head over to youtube.com/restaurant unstoppable. Please subscribe. These cameras are heavy. I don't want to carry them around the country for nothing. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But if you're watching that, we'll try to have the spreadsheet right there overlaid.
Sure, no problem.
For the listeners, what are you seeing people? So what are some of the creative ways people are overcoming this back of house, front of house wage disparity, and what are creative things have the people you've interviewed done?
Some are using that service charge, which can be 3% to 25%. There's
they're saying
no rule there.
We're going to charge you 20% and don't tip us, but you can if you want to.
No, not don't tip us, just tip. Because a lot of restaurants don't say anything about tipping. They're going to charge you 20%
service charge,
a service charge and they'll tell you that belongs to the restaurant to do with what they need to do, but they don't say anything about no tipping
So you can tip on top of that.
They kind of expect you to, actually.
I don't think you should tip on top of that.
No, you shouldn't. But then the server doesn't get.
But here's the thing sorry, go ahead.
Because the server's still being paid minimum wage at that point.
Yeah.
But if the server is now being paid $25 to $30 an hour, basically a $55,000 a year salary that shouldn't need tips at that point, and all that money that was a service charge really should just be in the price of the food.
I kind of push back sometimes on the servers who expect a 20% tip regardless, because I think it makes lazy servers.
It does. It can. Sure.
And I'm not saying people don't deserve to get tipped, but I'm saying you're not entitled to it.
Well, again, it's because
not a 20%.
Yeah.
Maybe a 10%. Like you don't get to just show up to your job and expect to make the most money.
No, and
they
shouldn't expect a tip, and that's where I'm getting at it too. The servers and even cooks that are in the business right now, a lot of them are working because it's a way to get someplace else in their life. For servers, it's the tip. For cooks, it's the experience that they can then take to their next job. But if everybody gets paid better, everybody at that $55,000-$60,000 a year level, they'll stay.
Yeah,
there's no reason to go.
Yeah,
and they'll get better and better and better.
Right. One thing I've seen, I'm curious if you've talked to anybody. Have you done anybody who rotates kitchen in front of house?
I have not, but I know that. Yeah, I've heard about that. Sure.
Just interviewed David Vienna, who's doing that in New Jersey. I've had a guest in New Hampshire on the show that does that. Oh, okay. I think it's a cool model.
Yeah.
But the challenge with that is not everybody has the chops to do front of house and front and back of house work.
Right. It does help the staff more cohesive a little bit.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, there are cooks and there are servers. And
you got to have a high standard on who you hire because that's a very special individual who can do all those things.
Yeah, it is.
But there are those individuals out there, and they're making good money.
Yeah.
You know, and they get their days are constantly changing. They don't get into they don't get bored because we're constantly doing different things.
Yeah, sure.
But is there anything else in terms of tipping that we haven't discussed?
Well,
with different models, anything that we haven't gone out, now's the time to get it out.
Well, we have to somehow teach the consumer how not to do it. They're so ingrained that they have to, that they feel bad. I know a lot of people who will pay that service charge, leave a tip anyway, even though they say there's no tipping, because they feel that they need to do that for their own good, so they feel better about themselves. And that really came from this time after the Civil War, when restaurant cooks and servers weren't paid at all. They were paid in tips. And it just kept getting worse and worse over the years. Even wages came into the combination. But still, the guest was shelling out 10%, 18%, 20%, just because they feel guilty if they don't. That's going to be the hardest thing to change, is the guilt and self-loathing the customer has when they don't tip.
I think this comes back to the responsibility of the industry to educate the consumer.
Right.
Back to like where we started, where like if we transform the restaurant industry, we will transform the world. We have to make the change before the consumer changes.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So,
well, there's a way to do it, and it's going to take a big marketing campaign, and that's kind of what the NRA is for, the
National Restaurant Association.
Yeah, not the other one.
I hate that we have to say that. Anyway.
Or at any of the other food organizations or websites or magazines.
Podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts. Keep promoting, going in that direction. And so owners will feel more comfortable.
Well, we got to educate owners first, so the owner can turn around and educate the consumer.
Right, exactly. And I think eventually, and by eventually, it could be 30, 40 years.
I think it could be 2-3 years.
No, I don't think so.
But I think it's exponential, man. It's exponential. I think we forget that the world we live in, information's moving, culture is transforming so fast. I think about my perspective in like the conversation around race and equality and sexuality. When I was a kid 30 years ago, like,
there were no conversations.
Yeah, if you were gay or whatever, or a minority of some sort, like I grew up in New Hampshire where there wasn't a lot of diversity. Mm-hmm. Like, you were teased. And to think about where we are now, just in like 20 years of like the cultural fluidity of open-mindedness and welcoming people, I think this thing's gonna be accelerated. Yeah. I think that culture is changing so fast, and it's because of information flowing, and because you don't have people at the very top controlling the narrative. Like I don't know. Maybe you're right, 20 years, but I hope we meet in the middle, maybe somewhere in like 10 years.
The more owners we get involved, the education process will speed up.
Yeah.
If you only have 2 or 3, it's going to take a long time. So, and that's a hard part to convince, are these guys who have been operating restaurants for 20 years. They have a good, solid business. Why change?
I'm sure there's thousands of restaurants doing it now. The thing is, they're just not the Danny Meyers and the Dirt Candy of the world.
Candy, yeah.
These people have media and publicity.
Sure.
I know there's people out there doing it.
Well, sure. If Danny went back to it, then I think that would help a lot.
Right.
The fact that he pulled out scares a lot of people. Because here's a very successful restaurateur. He did no tipping.
He was losing his people. That's from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, it was also during the pandemic, and that didn't help.
No. Tobie, I've really loved today's conversation, my friend. We're over the 2-hour mark. It goes by so fast.
It does. Wow.
And you were a great guest.
Yeah.
And
you're a good interviewer.
Thank you very much, man. I had a lot of fun talking to you. Again, tell us how we can get in touch with you, how we can follow you and follow your podcast.
Well, the podcasts are at any streamer you want. Just search for Restaurant Legends. It's on TuneIn, iHeartRadio, all those places. Or go to the website, which is restaurantlegends.com, which you can find a link to, hopefully, this interview and other information. There's a link to an email. If you want to send me an email, tell me how great I am. And there's there's even a phone number I think you can call on.
We'll have that website in the show notes. If you head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/1001, the summary of today's discussion, as well as any links to tools, services, or books. You had a couple books that you brought to the table. I don't know if you want to give a shout out to these authors. I've had Corey Mintz on the show.
Yeah, and I can't wait. I'm like halfway through the book, and when I get done with it, I'm going to give him a buzz.
So the Corey Mintz book is the Next Supper.
The Next Supper, and it's very interesting. He goes into a lot of detail.
A lot of the stuff we talked about today.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, but this is the most interesting one. I just want me to hold it up.
Yeah, the Itching Palm.
Itching Palm.
What's the subtitle there? A study of.
Yeah, a study of the habit of tipping in America.
I might have to pick that one up.
And that was written in 1918.
I can't get it signed by the author, unfortunately.
No. And he goes into tipping not just restaurants, but everywhere.
Yeah.
How in 1918, you were expected to tip, the guy shining your shoes, the guy opening a door for you at the hotel. Everybody got a tip.
I don't mind the idea of tipping and being generous with money like that, because I do believe in conscious capitalism. I do believe in generosity. I do believe in an abundance mindset. But I think you should do those things when people have earned them.
And that's where he was getting at it too. And it's the most exciting part for me was when this was written. Now, this is written 90 years ago, 80 years ago, whatever. And we're in the same spot. Some of those industries have gone away from tipping.
History repeats. It's a pendulum.
It doesn't repeat. It holds steady with an iron fist.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't really have any solutions other than some of the stuff we've talked about. And this ownership changing their view of it, consumers changing their view of it. But like I said, the most interesting part, that in 1918 this problem was there and we did nothing.
Yeah. Tobie, thank you so much. We can't say goodbye without having you call somebody out. You've actually already been super generous. I will say, you introduced me to Dave Anderson from Dave's Famous Barbecue.
Right.
He introduced me to Steve. Say his last name for me. Schuessler. Thank you very much. Yeah. Who was the founder of the Rainforest Cafe. Right. And I know people are like, are we really going to have a theme restaurant on the show? I'm sure he's going to have amazing lessons for us. He has a restaurant in Disney that does $50 million a year right now. No. So themed restaurants haven't gone. I mean, they're not like they used to be, as prolific as they used to be, but there's a place for him.
Yeah, he's a great showman. Actually, I knew him in Chicago a little bit as well. We both came up here right about the same time. He had a restaurant called Jukebox Saturday Night, and it was right next to the theater that had the first performances of Grease. And Jukebox was a 50s themed restaurant. In fact, he even had a 57 Chevy sticking out of the building. It was all lit up. A great showman.
He's a master on experience.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So you'll have a very exciting interview, especially at the lab.
Was there anyone else you wanted to call out?
Well, I had mentioned Daniel Del Prado here in Minneapolis.
Talking to him tomorrow.
Oh, good. Yeah. Daniel has done exciting things with restaurants. He's from Argentina, but he's got restaurants he's got a great pizza restaurant. I forgot the name of it, but he's like 4 or 5 other restaurants right now.
I think he's at 8 total.
8 restaurants? Yeah, he's just been, and he does everyone well. You walk into,
I was afraid that he was going to be the one that is mediocre that everybody knows about. I was like, oh God, I hope it's not Daniel.
Yeah, he's got the he's got the formula. Because the first time I went into Martina, which is now a couple years ago, felt right. The hostess was doing the right thing. The servers were doing the right thing. I sat near the kitchen on purpose. The cooks were doing the right thing. The food was great. The ambiance was great. They were friendly and informal. So that just told me he got it. I could see how he set up the service bar, and it was correct. And that's one of the hardest things to set up for anybody. But I think Daniel, hopefully he won't get too big, because that's going to be harder and harder to.
I'll tell him that you have concerns that he's going to get too big.
You can also tell him that I just love his restaurants.
I will, for sure. Okay. Tobie, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. Let me share your story. Let me share your perspectives, chopping it up with me.
Sure.
This was a little more two-way than usual. I feel like having another podcaster on the show kind of gave me that liberty to have more of a conversation.
Absolutely. I love it.
And this is where I say there is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable. Right, thank you so much.
Alrighty.
Cheers.
Bye.